A man named Charles Stone is serving time in prison, but does he deserve it? He is about to tell his true story. Stella Tomlinson works as a taxi driver. She never looks happy, living as if on autopilot. When a drunk passenger starts getting handsy, even though his companion clearly doesn't want it, Stella demands that the guy get out of the car. After work, she stops by the mall for breakfast and strikes up a conversation with her old acquaintance, a cop named Remy. His jokes cheer her up a little, but then Stella gets a call that immediately throws her off balance. In the evening she meets with her ex-husband, Paul. Today Paul received a package with a voice recorder. With the prison administration's and the ex-spouse's permission, Charles Stone had recorded a message for them. Listening to Charles's voice is incredibly difficult, but they have to go through it together. The couple lost their daughter, and Charles Stone is the man who was blamed for it. He talks about how unbearable it is to live with this and asks them to meet him. Maybe that meeting will help them move on. Stella can't hold back her emotions. Paul asks his ex-wife not to distance herself from him. For the first time since their daughter's death, they give in to their feelings. Paul's new girlfriend, Mara, comes home from work earlier than expected, and the ex-spouses pretend nothing happened between them. Paul says that Charles wants to meet with them. Stella leaves quickly, unable to get Paul's words out of her head, and the next day she meets with Bobby Carter, a psychologist and social worker. 3 years have passed since the trial, but Stella still hasn't found the strength to go on with her life, while everyone keeps advising her to have another child. Bobby Carter, however, suggests that Stella agree to meet with Charles. Perhaps hearing the personal remorse of the man who took her daughter's life will help her let go of the past. Bobby knows what it's like to lose a loved one. She has her own tragic experience. Years ago, in despair, she agreed to meet with the guy who took her brother's life, and it changed a lot for her. Only through forgiveness can one find a path to inner freedom. But Stella doubts she can handle a personal meeting with Charles Stone. No words of forgiveness will lessen her pain. Stella visits her mother at the farm. Jessie Cole takes care of the horses, using physical labor as a way to distract herself from unwanted thoughts. Jessie confesses to her daughter that she has a suitor, Kelvin, the owner of the stables. And Jessie plans to introduce her daughter to him this evening. Stella suddenly remembers that today is her mother's birthday. Sensing something is bothering her daughter, Jessie asks her to be honest about what's going on. And Stella tells her. Jessie thinks the meeting with Charles isn't such a bad idea, believing it might help her daughter take a step forward. Maybe she'll even go back to working in the office. Stella doesn't know what the right thing to do is. Maybe her mother is right, and she has nothing to lose anyway. Stella ignores Paul's calls, realizing he won't support her idea to meet with Charles. Pulling herself together, she puts on makeup for the first time in a long while and heads to her mother's birthday party. All their friends and relatives are there. Stella refuses to drink. She hasn't touched alcohol since her daughter died. Seeing Paul outside the window, looking concerned, Stella goes out to talk to him. He confesses that Mara is pregnant, which means a new life is beginning for them. Right now Paul is worried that Stella might have told someone about their moment of weakness, but she hasn't. In tears she steps out of the car, then leaves a voice message for Bobby, agreeing to the meeting with Charles Stone. And so the day of the meeting arrives. Stella tells Bobby that she's not going to forgive Charles under any circumstances, she just wants the truth. And Charles wants to tell it. Stella and Bobby arrive at the prison. The conversation will be recorded, and both sides will be heard. This way Charles gets a chance to clear his conscience, and Stella, a chance to get answers. At last they meet face to face for the first time since the trial. Charles doesn't look like someone capable of cruelty, but maybe first impressions are deceiving. Bobby asks Charles to tell everything from the beginning and start with why he stole Stella's car. Charles explains that at the time, he had only been out of prison for 3 months and didn't have a penny to his name. He drank heavily, having hit rock bottom. When he spotted Stella's car, Charles decided it was his chance to make some money. The house was dark, and he assumed no one was home. Right now he deeply regrets what he did. When Charles says that Stella should also feel guilty for leaving Maisy alone that night, Stella, overwhelmed with emotion, walks out of the room. Bobby urges her to continue the conversation. It's the only way Stella can get what she wants. And eventually Stella agrees, though it's not easy for her. They return, and Bobby asks Charles to tell them what he did and why. Charles explains that he broke into the Tomlinsons' house and immediately found the car keys. Then he saw Maisy, but by that time she was already lifeless, which means it wasn't Charles who was guilty, it was someone else. In shock, Stella and Bobby don't know how to react. Charles insists that he was set up and that Maisy is not the only victim. A girl named Cleo Dale has recently gone missing, and those who did this to Maisy will do the same to Cleo. The guards take Charles away as he yells that he is innocent. Stella tries to pull herself together in the bathroom while Bobby says how sorry she is. Charles was supposed to confess and take responsibility for his actions, But things didn't go as planned. Stella asks Bobby not to call her again. Later, Bobby speaks with Charles, telling him that what he did was unforgivable, putting the social program at risk, one that brings comfort to many people and using it for his own purposes. Charles probably has no idea how hard it is to look into the eyes of someone who destroyed your life. Bobby hopes Charles gets a longer sentence for breaking the rules. Stella can't be alone right now, so she stays with her mother. After some hesitation, she searches online for information about the missing girl, Cleo Dale. Jesse recognizes Cleo in the photo. She had come to the stables several times and was even friends with Maisy. According to Jesse, Cleo came from a troubled family. Seeing a picture of Maisy and Cleo together, Stella is puzzled as to why she never knew about their friendship. Jesse remembers how much Maisy loved horses. Charles gets a new cellmate, Jamal Abushi. Later, Charles talks to someone on the phone, promising that they will be together soon. In the evening, Stella keeps searching the internet for information about Cleo Dale. Some inmates have access to mobile phones, and Charles is one of them. So he too is searching for information about Cleo. Stella remembers how on the night of her daughter's death, she had been at a party. Everyone was drunk, but after reading a message from Maisy, Stella went home. There, she saw Charles and lifeless Maisy. It was Christmas Eve. The past haunts Stella, who recalls Charles' words that he had only broken into their house and didn't harm Maisy. In despair, Stella screams and soon decides to meet with Charles again. She asks him to tell her about Cleo Dale and how she's connected to Maisy. Charles explains that Cleo might be the missing link in the story, and that she's in danger. Stella wants to know who set Charles up. He says it was the McKellars. He worked for them. This family has a shady reputation in town. Charles claims the McKellars were selling substances to Cleo's mother. They may have taken Cleo because of her mother's debts. Charles insists again that he found Maisy already lifeless. He knew no one would believe in his innocence, so he tried to flee the scene. Stella needs time to think and leaves. That evening she meets Remy at a pub. He believes she's grasping at straws and advises her not to get involved with the McKellars. Jamal cries at night. Charles tells him to show as little emotion as possible, or he won't survive in here. After a call from Bobby, Paul comes to Stella and says he knows about the meeting. Stella in turn says that Charles might be innocent, and there might be another victim. Paul can't believe his ex-wife truly thinks that, convinced that Charles is just using her to get out. Paul doesn't want Stella to see Charles again. Meanwhile, Charles asks Jamal why he's here. Jamal says he drove drunk and hit a pregnant woman. Now to see his daughter again, he has to serve his time. And he knows he deserves it. Stella doesn't plan to give up and meets with Charles' father, who says Charles had aggressive tendencies since childhood, and it only got worse over the years. Charles' mother, who passed away long ago, never loved him. Mr. Stone apologizes to Stella for what his son did. Stella no longer knows what to believe. Later, she learns from Remy that a week before her disappearance, Cleo had called the police, wanting to say something about Maisy. But the girl never made it to the station. She vanished without a trace. Stella finds Cleo's boyfriend, but he doesn't want to talk and refuses to give her mother's address. Finally, Stella meets Kelvin, who is going through a divorce and owns the stable. Cleo used to visit the stable often, and Kelvin knows her address. The next day Stella heads there, but Cleo's mother leads an immoral lifestyle and clearly isn't worried about her daughter's disappearance. Getting nowhere, Stella leaves. She doesn't understand why no one seems to care that Cleo is missing. Doubts once again push Stella to visit Charles in prison. He talks about his mother's depression and his father's inaction. He saw everything but chose to turn a blind eye. Charles has a son, Teddy, and he advises Stella to talk to him. She goes to his place, and Teddy invites her inside. Since his father was imprisoned, Teddy has cut ties with crime and has nothing to do with the McKellars. Grace, Teddy's girlfriend, arrives and admires Stella's resilience. Not everyone in her shoes would have the courage to meet someone accused of causing a loved one's death. Teddy believes in his father's innocence and soon visits him in prison. For Charles, Teddy's help, along with Stella's efforts, is his only hope of getting the verdict reviewed, even though the young man fears the McKellars. Teddy mentions that his grandfather is terminally ill, but Charles still flatly refuses to see him. Stella spends the evening with Remy, her only friend. He's been searching for a girlfriend on dating apps for a long time, but without success. When Stella kisses Remy, he pulls away and says it's wrong. He doesn't want to take advantage of her emotional state. They hug. Once Stella chose Paul over Remy. But did she make the right choice? Remy mentions that Paul has been lying to Stella all these years. He never actually quit using after her pregnancy and has occasionally been buying substances from the McKellars. Stella confronts her ex-husband, but he denies everything. Stella suspects Paul is hiding something. He reminds her how she used to get drunk instead of staying home with Maisy. Stella knows Paul is lying and is determined to find out the truth. Charles teaches Jamal the ins and outs of prison life, advising him not to get involved in gambling. Carl McKellar is placed in the same prison, and Charles realizes it's no coincidence. Carl wants to make sure Charles will keep quiet, hinting that it's better for everyone that way. Carl doesn't plan to stay here long. Jesse doesn't understand why Stella believes Charles but not Paul. Stella is completely confused and decides to speak to Mara while Paul is out. Stella directly voices her suspicions. Mara admits that on the night Maisy died, Paul was with her in a hotel. Their affair has been going on for a while, but Mara no longer wants to keep lying. Paul arrives, and Stella reveals what happened between them a few weeks ago, then leaves. Jamal also thinks Charles should see his father. There won't be a second chance. Charles doesn't know what to do. He's made too many mistakes and is now paying for them. Eventually he agrees to meet with his father, who has stopped taking some of his medications because it clouds his mind. Mr. Stone has only a few weeks left at most. Now Mr. Stone just wants Charles to take responsibility for what he's done. Charles feels heartbroken, even though he never stopped loving his father. That's where their conversation ends. Later, in a burst of emotion, Charles yells at Jamal to never stick his nose into other people's business again. Charles isn't like the others here, who are serving time justly. Cleo's mother finally agrees to talk to Stella and gives her Cleo's tablet. Maybe it contains some clues. She also thanks Stella for caring about Cleo's fate. Stella spends the entire evening going through the contents of Cleo's tablet. Cleo was a cheerful girl who loved horses. In one of the videos, Cleo and Maisy enter some trailer, clearly without permission. Inside, the girls find various substances. Seeing this, Stella can't hold back her emotions. When someone else enters, the video abruptly ends. Without hesitation, Stella heads to that trailer, unaware that someone is following her. She steps inside, and soon Kelvin enters behind her, asking what she's doing there. Stella shows him the video. Kelvin assures her that he's just as surprised and had no idea what was happening here. But Stella doesn't believe he was unaware of what was happening on his own property. Over the phone, Teddy tells his father that his grandfather has passed away. Charles can't hold back his tears. His father died without ever being convinced of his innocence. Stella wants to tell her mother about the video, but Kelvin beats her to it. Stella openly shows her distrust of Kelvin, which Jesse doesn't like. Just because these things happen on Kelvin's property doesn't mean he's guilty. Jesse tells Stella she's become a puppet in Charles Stone's hands, which leads to an argument, and Stella leaves. After Charles humiliated Jamal in front of everyone, inmates started mocking him. Charles feels sorry. Soon he meets Stella again, and she tells him everything she's managed to uncover. Charles keeps insisting he was set up. And apparently Stella didn't know nearly as much about her teenage daughter's life as she wanted to believe. Charles says every meeting between them is a huge risk because the McKellars are watching him. So he suggests they continue talking over the phone. Kelvin decides to confess to Jesse and Stella that he once found some substances in his trailer, probably left there by dealers looking for a stash spot. Later, Kelvin received hush money from Roman McKellar, which allowed him to keep the stables. For some time Kelvin covered for the McKellars' illegal activity. They were selling substances, even to teenagers at the stables. Stella comes to Paul and Mara's house. It's Christmas Eve. But no one is home, and Stella enters Maisy's room where her things are still kept. Stella finds a photo of Maisy, strangely labeled with the name Misty. Paul arrives, and Stella asks him if he knew anything about it. Paul is exhausted by all this, unsure what his wife is trying to achieve. After his affair was exposed, Mara left to stay with her parents, so Paul's new life might be over before it even begins. In any case, both Paul and Stella admit that it's partly their fault. They knew nothing about their 14-year-old daughter's life. Paul tells Stella that shortly before the tragedy, he was called to the school because Maisy got into a fight with another girl, Ashna Rami. Paul decided not to tell Stella because he suspected Maisy knew about him and Mara. Stella doesn't understand what he was missing in their marriage. Paul says they had grown apart a long time ago, and Maisy was the only thing keeping them together. Haunted by doubts, Stella meets with Ashna and shows her a photo of Cleo, asking if she knows her. Ashna doesn't know Cleo but says that Maisy used to date the guy who got the substances for her. Ashna doesn't know his name because Maisy kept everything secret, which is why they fought. Stella calls Charles and asks if he knows Roman McKellar, noting that he was the one who bribed the stable owner. Charles replies that Roman McKellar runs everything. Stella wants to know where to find Roman McKellar, though Charles strongly advises against getting involved. Roman is one of the most dangerous men in town. But Stella doesn't care, and she comes to Roman's house, where a Christmas party is going on. Roman already knows about Stella's meetings with Charles and hints that if she keeps digging, things won't end well for her. Before Stella leaves, she sees Lee, the supposed boyfriend of Cleo who turns out to be Roman's eldest son. Stella spends Christmas with Remy. He whispers to her that he found security footage in Cleo's case file showing the girl getting into a red car. It was the last time she was seen. The driver's face and the license plate are unrecognizable. Stella is starting to doubt Charles's guilt more and more. He was the most obvious and convenient suspect, which played right into the McKellar's hands. Meanwhile, Roman visits Charles in prison, making it clear that if he doesn't stop playing games, Teddy will pay the price. No one can protect Teddy now, and Charles knows it. When the other inmates start bullying Jamal again, Charles steps in to defend him. Charles truly regrets his temper, and in their cell, he hugs Jamal and asks for his forgiveness. The prison authorities decide to let Charles attend his father's funeral. Jessie tells her daughter she broke up with Kelvin. If Jessie had known what was going on right under Kelvin's nose, she never would have dated him. Stella doesn't hold it against her mother. She herself knew nothing about Maisy's life. They all made mistakes, but the past can't be changed. Mother and daughter hug, forgiving each other for everything. At the funeral, Teddy cries, but it matters to him that his father came too. Through tears, Teddy gives a eulogy, talking about what a good man his grandfather was. Charles is given a moment to speak with his son. He urges Teddy and Grace to leave town immediately and go into hiding, for their own safety. But Teddy doesn't want to go. This is his whole life. While Stella keeps an eye on Lee, Charles runs into Carl McKellar in prison. Stella approaches Lee and asks if he knew Maisy and what their connection was. When Lee refers to Maisy as Misty, Stella realizes he's the guy. As Stella continues following Lee, who stumbles drunkenly out of a pub, Carl intimidates Charles. But suddenly Charles attacks Carl. At the same moment, Stella snaps a photo of Lee's red car. Now she knows for sure who abducted Cleo. Charles understands there will be consequences for what he did. He wasn't sent to solitary because Carl kept his mouth shut. The McKellars need Charles in here. And now Teddy's life is in danger. Despite everything, Stella visits Charles in prison again and tells him that Lee is the one who took Cleo. Now Stella fully believes in Charles's innocence. He thought he'd never hear those words again and sincerely thanks her. However, Charles is ready to give up right now, even if it means staying in prison for the rest of his life. But Stella refuses to back down and tells Charles something she's never told anyone. That night, she got drunk at a friend's place and ignored a message from Maisy. And she still can't stop thinking about what might have happened if she had read it right away. Nothing can be done for Maisy now, but maybe Cleo can still be saved. Charles tells Stella to forget everything and returns to his cell, not expecting Jamal to attack him with a sharp object. Jamal had no choice, the McKellars threatened him. Stella hopes Remy can help and get a warrant for Lee's arrest, but Remy is powerless, the evidence is too weak. Charles is taken to intensive care. Barely conscious, he recalls Stella's words about his innocence. He also remembers his son, who warned him from the beginning that his ties to the McKellars would end badly for all of them. Stella follows Lee's car, which leads her to a seedy nightclub. While Lee is distracted, Stella breaks his car window. The alarm goes off, but she manages to grab the bag from the front seat. When Lee finds out his car's been broken into, he runs outside but can't stop Stella from driving away. After getting away, Stella goes through the bag and finds an old cell phone, apparently the one Lee uses to contact his clients. When Remy finds out that Stella broke into someone's car, he tells her she made a huge mistake. Even a text message on the phone from the day Maisy disappeared wouldn't be considered strong enough evidence in court against the McKellars. None of this will bring Maisy back, and Remy begs Stella to stop before it's too late. She's done all she could for Cleo. But Stella has nothing left to lose. After she and Remy part ways, she types the address from Lee's phone into her GPS and heads there. Charles can't stop thinking about his son. It wasn't Lee, it was Teddy who was dating Misty, or rather Maisy, but Charles couldn't have known that. Meanwhile, Stella arrives at the address she found in Lee's phone and ends up at a drug den. She sees a woman clearly out of it and shows her a photo of Cleo. The woman looks toward an upstairs door. The door is locked, and Stella breaks it open. Cleo is really there, looking terrified. Stella urges her to come with her. But Cleo refuses, saying the McKellars will find her anyway. Stella promises she won't let that happen. Charles regains consciousness. Stella plans to take Cleo to her place, but Lee is waiting for them in his car, so they head to Paul's house instead. Before asking Cleo for details, Stella wants her to rest first. In the bathroom, Cleo remembers how on the fateful night, she and Maisy spent time together with Teddy and Lee. At one point Maisy suggested they all go to her place, no one was home anyway. Stella tells Paul that Cleo and all of them are in danger because of the McKellars. Before going to the police, she wants to speak to Cleo herself, the only one who can tell the whole truth. Despite his concern, Paul lets his ex-wife go through with it. Teddy visits his father in the hospital room. Charles says Stella will soon learn the truth about what really happened that night. He finally realizes Misty and Maisy are the same person. And Charles wants to hear from his son what truly happened. In tears, Teddy says he had nothing to do with it. Cleo remembers the last time she was in that house with Maisy, Teddy, and Lee. The teens were planning to have fun with alcohol from Maisy's parents' stash. In the present, Cleo asks Stella why she's being so kind. Why did she even look for her? Stella promises to protect her, but says Cleo has to tell the whole truth. In tears, Cleo reveals that she was in the house that night and that Teddy, Charles's son, was Maisy's boyfriend. This shocks both Stella and Paul. When Maisy found out that Teddy and Cleo had a brief fling, she became furious. Charles doesn't want to believe that his son was involved in any of this. Teddy saw him in prison every day and went on living his life, all while knowing the truth. Teddy tells his father that he didn't want a life like his, so he felt forced to lie. At the same time, Cleo tells Stella and Paul how Maisy started insulting her. At some point, Cleo couldn't take it anymore and in an emotional outburst struck Maisy with a heavy object, ending her life. Not knowing what to do, Lee called his father, who then framed Charles to divert suspicion away from the teenagers. Afterward, Cleo used Maisy's phone to send Stella a message saying someone was outside. When Stella arrived, she found Charles at the crime scene. Everything had gone according to plan. Stella cannot comprehend that the girl she thought was a victim was behind all of it. In tears, Cleo keeps repeating that she never meant to hurt Maisy, but no words could lessen Stella's fury. Paul has to pull Stella away from Cleo to prevent a fight. Soon after, Cleo is sentenced to prison. Stella and Paul visit the girl to hear her remorse, as part of the social rehabilitation program. Later, Stella meets with Charles, who is determined to change his life for the sake of his son. Like Cleo, Teddy is also serving time, for obstruction of justice. Both Stella and Charles have made many mistakes as parents. Making mistakes is human, but not everyone is capable of forgiving themselves and moving on.